Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to the Ummahpreneur podcast. I'm really excited today to bring to you a very special guest with me on this episode. And of course, you guys know me, I always bring you special guests. And this is Sister Amal Kassir. Amal, assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the podcast.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm so happy to be here today.
Definitely. I'm happy to have you. And thank you so much for joining me. And just to let the guests know a little bit about you, Amal is an international award winning spoken word poet, mashallah, and she's given multiple TED Talks. She's toured around the United States, and she's also involved in humanitarian initiatives for Syria. And I want you to share with us a little bit, Amal, if that's okay with you, in your own words, what it is that you do at the moment.
Hmm. I think the phrase storytelling activism has been a repeating one that's come up, and it's right now, especially after this post-COVID world and what I was doing before COVID. Really, what my work entailed was going to different communities across the United States, across the world, really, um, and tapping in to the deeper part of the human heart through the stories of Syria and through the stories of those going through social political turmoil and the like. So, really, it's to like unearth the humanity that tends to be like coded deep inside of these like controversial topics. So activism through stories, it really
Ooh,
changes.
that's a heavy one. That's a heavy one that you just threw on me there, Ahmed. So, it's interesting that you're throwing this at me right now because I've been actually not even near of a noble cause is what you're sharing, but I've been interested in storytelling recently, and it was for a more selfish reason. I'm trying to become a better storyteller to be able to create content, whether it's through the podcast and through the videos and the things that we do, that people are more engaged with. Because one thing that I've noticed is that people generally, as human beings, we are attracted to story. We want to care. We want you to take us on a journey of emotions. And I think for someone who is able to capture stories and then relay them to other people, it is such a beautiful and powerful talent because it will allow you to communicate those emotions and those feelings to other people that might not have been there with you when you were going through it, but you can try to, get them to experience the same things that you've experienced. And I think that's so beautiful. Now, why or what even drove you to be here today? I'm sure you didn't go up thinking that you were going to become this activist storyteller. So how did you stumble upon where you are today?
SubhanAllah, the word you use, stumble, is a right word to
Mm,
use. Because this was not something I pursued. It was not something I planned for. I was 11 as angsty teenager. What was happening in Palestine and Israel, it caused me to write a poem. But I didn't
mm,
know it was a poem. I was writing a speech. There was a lot of metaphors in the speech, but I had not been exposed to the world of spoken word. So, it was in me to write, it was in me to address leadership from a very young age. But subhanAllah, a slam poetry event came to the school. I was the first hijabi on the Brave New Voices international stage.
mm,
And then the war in Syria really, really started. And so, in a lot of ways, what was happening overseas, the violence that was taking place, and the lack of awareness that was happening over here, um,
mm,
kind of put me in a position that made it necessary for me to tell my story. And it wasn't the easiest. It's a scary thing for a kid to go out there and talk politics on a stage with all these adults. And I was 16 years old really when I started diving into this. It's been a decade. I'm 26 now. I've been doing this public speaking, performance poetry thing for a whole decade, and the transformation over time has been wild. But to answer your question, I stumbled into it through a poetry slam, and the war in Syria made sure that there was always something important to talk about.
SubhanAllah. Being a child and putting yourself out there on stage, I can't imagine how that must feel, especially as adults. It's even harder. You put yourself on stage at the age of 16, and then you continue to do so, and you continue to do so up to this day. So, what is it about you that drives you in those moments when you're about to go on stage and you can feel the pressure and the nervousness, and the kind of like the weight of all these eyes that are going to be staring at you as you go up there?
There are some stages where the pressure is more than others, certainly.
Mm,
For example, the TED Talk that I did.
mm,
Um, I don't usually get nervous. I love this. When I was little, when I was in kindergarten, I was like Sally, the lead of the play and everything. So I wasn't unaccustomed to that kind of attention, I guess you could say. But when it came to the TED Talk, I was nervous.
Mm.
I was really worried that I could maybe impact someone's perception of Islam, of the deen, because no matter what, when you go up there publicly with the hijab on and you are a Muslim, whether you want it or not, you are representing the deen.
Correct.
Heavy burden, it really is. And
Yeah.
I remember someone taught me the dua. My cousin told me the dua of Musa alayhi salam. And رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. I remember I had this like in my note card in my hand, and I'm like, my hands are sweating, and like there's like a little bit of like Sharpie on my fingers. And I remember thinking, imagining Musa alayhi salam, who had a speech impediment. I mean, he did not have the natural eloquence, the natural water flowing from his mouth, you know. And then he wasn't going to address 3,000 white people. He was going to address the Pharaoh. So perception, perspective, and aligning yourself with your intention. I always say sincerity is way more important than confidence on these stages, because even if your hands are shaking and your knees are trembling and you're stuttering, if you are speaking the truth and you are sincere in it, the truth will stand mightier than even your own words, you know. So perspective is very important.
Do you have like a pre-speaking routine? Like someone listening to this that's interested in public speaking and inshallah perhaps getting on stage one day and sharing their own story, their own message. Is there any advice that you can give them that helped you, get comfortable in those situations and be who you are today?
Yeah. I was a waitress at my father's restaurant for 6 years. So you learn how to navigate the awkward in those situations. And the fact of the matter is you tumble on your tongue.
Right.
Whoops. Laugh at your own jokes if no one else laughs. I have a lot of time doing that. And I think we become so worried about how multiple eyes are going to judge us. You know, and that is the fear of public speaking is the number one fear of in the United States, and number two is death. So Jerry Seinfeld said it. He said more people would rather be in the casket than read the eulogy, and
Wow.
yeah, it's wild. And so to go up there, yani, it is a privilege from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there is power in it. Again, even if you're stuttering, even if you're unprepared. And so I think the advice that I have, so there's like the soul advice, you know, be confident, be sincere, know your message, have some clarity. And then there's the other side of things, which is practice your speeches out loud. Out loud, you must. If you're practicing your speech quietly and you get up on a stage and you hear your voice for the very first time, that's gonna startle even you. Been there for sure. But they say clarity of message, and sincerity, knowing why you're there. You know, these are going to be things that really they break through the element, they break through the stutter, they break through even the forgetfulness. They're able to latch on to something that's human and spiritual. It is a spiritual thing. You're inciting, you're connecting to people's hearts, you're moving them, you're making them think of their past and their future. That's really powerful work.
SubhanAllah. What do you think of the way the media and the world is reacting to what is going on in Ukraine at the moment versus how the real world reacted when what happened in Syria began, and also what is currently happening in Palestine?
Yeah. You know, people are people. And I don't think most people are aware of how colossal this double standard is. How shameful it is. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, Germany started evicting Afghani refugees to make room for the Ukrainians. What a confusing humanity that is. I think, I mean, yes, the media is corrupt. Yes, the hypocrisy against brown people and Muslims and non-white immigrants is just obscene. What I know about Ukraine is that people care. There is a humanitarian mobilization of people who really wouldn't care about suffering otherwise. So they're showing war, they're showing suffering, and this is good. Now it is the responsibility of the storytellers and the poets and the people who are willing to do this, like this work that we shouldn't have to do, to just remind them that humanity is not just white right now. Donate to Uber to support Ukraine and all, but subhanAllah, we are forgetful, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes us as such. Adam alayhi salam, in the word insan, to describe the human being in Arabic comes from the word insan. It's from the same root, and I like to think that ignorance is not always chosen. So when it comes to Ukraine, the way I've reconciled this is it is a mass ignorance that is taking place in the hearts of man, and a mass political initiative and a manufactured controversy to get weapons overseas by the corporations of the government. Two separate conversations. It's compassionate, and one is political and very, very corrupt. What's happening?
Do you feel like sometimes you're kind of like yelling at a wall, like you're expressing yourself and you're putting these words out there, but there isn't enough change happening?
Yeah, I stopped yelling a long time ago because my throat was dying out, so I just try to make the wall cry instead. I make the wall cry, ideally.
Wow, subhanAllah, that's beautiful. Now, of course,
for sure, it's very easy to get jaded with this work.
It is, for sure. And I didn't mean to offend you this question, but I'm just being real, right? In the situation that you are in. I mean, I can imagine that someone at some point will be like, well, I mean, we've been saying this for years. How much longer do we have to keep saying this kind of thing, right? And of course, I mean, that would be a defeatist attitude to look at it that way, wouldn't it?
I'm not going to pretend like I've been able to keep the spirits up. They've transformed, for sure. I mean, our understanding of what victory Syria, then it was, it was revolution, it was surviving the bombs and things like that. Now it's like, inshallah, we can get some bread to the starving people on Eid. You have to reinterpret what progress looks like and what success and good looks like over time, or else you will have no reason to have hope. There is no reason to have hope unless you find that reason. And you must look very closely and pay attention to the details of humanity. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests his creation, and it's easy to overlook, and we can't there's always a big picture. We have to just change the perspective on that big picture sometimes. So, yeah.
I'm based in Canada. Where are you?
I'm in Houston, Texas right now.
Houston, Texas. Amazing. Texas has a pretty awesome Muslim community, I've heard.
The best food in America, without it. The halal food scene is outstanding.
That's amazing. Honestly, like I definitely love to come visit Texas at some point, because there's like so many also amazing like Muslim speakers that I follow that are based out of there. And I don't know if you've ever been to. It might not be close to you, but Roots Institute in Dallas, Fort Worth.
I listen to the podcast. Dallas is about a 5-hour drive from here.
Oh, okay, so it's not too close to you then. Okay,
maybe we can feel it. We know,
right? We can feel it. I love that. SubhanAllah. But yeah, it's awesome to see that there's a pretty strong Muslim community in Texas, which is in the South. It's something that you wouldn't expect, isn't it? Which is interesting.
Yeah, in Houston, you're on the inside, and being hijab, because I'm born and raised in Denver, so I'm from the mountains. I like to make sure the Texans know that, and it was very white, and I did not know how white it was until I left Houston back to Denver and spent some time there, and I was like, you won't get used to it. There's hijabis everywhere you go. There's
really
Arabs. You are not. It's the first time living in a city where I'm not a stranger necessarily.
Do you feel like there is there any animosity because of that from people who might not be Muslim and Arab there, to be like, well, you guys are kind of like taking over this space right now? Have you felt that, or have you experienced that at all, or was it the opposite? Was it more like a welcoming vibe?
That's a very interesting question. I would imagine that sentiment existed way before they became such a large population. At this point, these are like the CEOs of the companies. These are people starting startups. The Muslims are, they are educated here. There is an intellectual, it's in the realm of intellect and progress, not so much, yeah.
SubhanAllah, that's amazing. And that's good to hear, because ultimately as Muslims, even within Ummahpreneur, that is pretty much our mission. It's how we can change the narrative through entrepreneurship, through business, through being able to contribute to our communities in a different way and make ourselves a seat at the table. And I think, being contributors to our communities is a big part of that, right? Of not just being there and being like, well, yes, I'm here to, kind of benefit just like everyone else, but rather think of how can I provide value, right? Being here. And I think, Islam, subhanallah, so beautifully is growing at an exponential rate, despite what we see in the media, right? Despite all the negativity that we see in the media and all the negative pictures, subhanallah, Islam is still one of the fastest growing religions in the world, if not the fastest growing. Last time I checked, and it is set to be one of the biggest religion in the world. I believe. I forget if it was like by the year like 2050 or 2070 or something. I'm forgetting the stat, so don't take my word for it. But I know that it's set to be on course to be the biggest religion in the world and surpass Christianity. And looking at that and looking at, subhanAllah, the pace that Islam is growing, I think a big part of it, a big reason of that is that more and more this interconnected world that we have is going past the media and connecting people to people more and more, whether it's through social media, whether it's through people mixing, in cultures and religions in different areas, just like Texas so beautifully, right? Where you have a Muslim population, a Christian population, other populations that are all mixing together. And then for people to see, oh, well, you're not this, crazy desert person that I see on the news. You're a normal, contributive member of society, and your values are pretty awesome, and you're kind, and you're generous, and you have a beautiful character, and wow, and you tell, well, yeah, that's because that's what the Prophet taught us, and just, oh, really? So that's what it is. And I feel like people don't really know that. People don't really get to see that until they actually meet a Muslim and experience that for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. We shouldn't be shy. We shouldn't be so. I see it sometimes where like we don't interact with the other side, and my mom's a convert. My mom's white. My uncle's name is Bruce and Jim and Ken, and I have Amal Khalid, Muhammad, and Saleh. And it's if my mother was deprived of Islam simply because the Pakistani family didn't put their daughter in their 6th grade class, that's how my mom found Islam, a 6th grader in her class in Iowa. And if we deprive the others of this beautiful message, Ya Allah, what a theft to the people. This might be crazy to say, but I believe that Islam will heal the wounds in this country, because this is a country in pain. You don't go out and you don't slaughter. There's no high school shootings. There's none of that in a healthy, functioning society. But there are a lot of wounds here, and Islam is a beautiful religion that will heal us too, inshallah, if we let it,
Why do you think that is?
Why
do you think? Yes.
In the context of the non-Muslims or of the Muslims? Because
you know what, wherever direction you want to take it.
Causing the wounds, I believe it starts with the family. It starts with the family. We're inheriting a lot of generational trauma that's coming down. We are in a position. So my other job, in addition to being a poet, is I'm a program manager of a Muslim youth mental health program. And we are experiencing something right now that it's so upsetting, and it's so stigmatized that when this study came out, we were like, how is that possible? In August 2021, just last year, a few months ago, they found that Muslims in the United States have the highest rate of attempted suicide out of any minority. Muslims, it's us. Man, that's wild. And I don't see it so much as we have the added pressure of our identity, but I think when we strip the Muslim part and just keep it at humanity, there is a lot of domestic violence that is happening from one family to the next. Then the kid hits his kid, and then the kid, and it's just going down. We have lost this deep connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and instead we're living amongst the society, and the society is almost our God in a lot of ways. It's scary stuff. We're gatekeeping the masajid and the institutions. If we're talking Islamically, it might be the masajid in some places. In others, it could just be the school or the church. People are leaving. the institutions are far more political than they are spiritual. And if we don't even have a safe home to go back to, how are we supposed to grow and thrive? You know, Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, everything that this deen did was to keep the heart upright and to make sure that the integrity of the family was protected through the gender aspect, through the business aspect, through all these various things. And we are broken right now, and not just the non-Muslims. The Arabs are in pain, the Isis are in pain. Look at our nations. Look at the Middle East. Look at the state of the militarism and the leadership. Something is not right, and I believe it starts in the home. It's very loaded to like get started.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective, you know, and I think you are correct in some shape or form. But I acknowledge that it starts there. I acknowledge that it starts there, but I also, part of me also unfortunately believes that part of it as well is that it was done on, there was some sort of intentionality behind all of this, and that it wasn't just happenstance, and that yes, of course, I think the first place that we need to begin as Muslims is our homes. What can we do within our relationships, within our families, to ensure that we build, contributive members of society that are, well raised, that are emotionally stable, that have the love of the home, that have, that comfort of the home, that have, that understanding with their parents, and, that support system that every person needs and every human needs, and that belonging. But at the same time, when you look at some of these countries, as you mentioned, and I'm so grateful to be living in Canada. Alhamdulillah, I think Canada is a beautiful country, and I absolutely love it. And the U.S. also, it's an awesome country. But you look at some of the countries in the Middle East, not that they're not good, but I think there was this intentionality behind the state that they're in, and I think that it is not solely based off of society, but also based off of geopolitical circumstances that have caused these areas to be in this state at the moment, and it was very intentional. It wasn't random.
I appreciate that perspective, and it is very clear that the leaders and the scholars and those who are up above are the ones who are more accountable for the doom of mankind because of this. Yeah, you're so right.
It's tough. And then you look at the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, shout out. I didn't want this podcast to be political, but I said it was going to be a natural conversation, guys, and that's what I want it to be. But shout out Justin Trudeau. Love the guy, but his policies sometimes I don't really agree with. And, that's an interesting thing, though. Can I just mention one thing real quick? Is that, like, people don't differentiate anymore between the human being and their actions. And I think that's a very unfortunate thing, in the sense that even when it comes to just your friends or people that you know or your family, if someone does something that you don't agree with, you automatically don't like the person. But why can't you just not like the action and separate it from the person? And the reason why I'm saying that is because I was actually following, I'm going to finish this discourse, I promise, but I was actually following Justin Trudeau's Twitter, because he made a post recently. He was like, oh, he went to Ukraine. He acknowledged that, like, Russia's doing war crimes. And I was looking at that and I was like angry within me. I was like, we've been literally signing like million signature petitions trying to get you to acknowledge the war crimes in Israel and Palestine, and like nothing's being done ever, right? No acknowledgement is ever being given, completely like sweep it under the rug. And it's just frustrating, right? But at the same time, then I look at his Twitter, and of course a lot of Canadians that don't agree with his policies, his ratings aren't super high right now. And there's people that in the comments are like calling for his death and his murder, and I'm like, whoa, that's geez, like that's really extreme. Like why do you want someone to die because you don't agree with his policies? Like that's insane to me that human beings go that far. I don't know.
It is insane. I wonder if that has to do with, like, we're a very like consuming society. Like, we consume media, we consume entertainment, even the feeds on our cell phones, and it's like, don't like, follow, unfollow, tune in, tune out. It's very like one-minded in a lot of ways.
Do you feel like it's led to people having more extreme views? Because even you look at the U.S. yourself, and you said it's pretty much in a wounded state right now, which is clear in just the things that are happening, and more the U.S. has taken a very extreme and polarizing stance. And I don't know if that's because it's the way it is, or it's because that's the way the media shows it to be. But people are generally becoming more extreme in their perspectives and opinions on things, whereas being moderate and having an open mind is like less and less common. I could be wrong.
Even the open-mindedness is a little like fascist sometimes, you know. That's some wild words.
Right.
But I think, like, you know, you have people that are so liberal and open-minded that if you don't agree with their realm of morality, if all of the little moral things they have on their shelf, you are an oppressor and there's something wrong with you, a bad person. And I don't want to call myself a retired activist, but having stepped away from the political and really focused on like the human heart and the introspective, there was a way in which we like took our oppression and we wore it like a badge. I mean, and it's like we forget that this human reality is on a spectrum. The oppressed can oppress people. You know what I mean? Like we can easily, we can be the wrong ones even in our own right side. And I think there's a lack of humility. I think that's what it is. There's a lack of humility, and it's like at a soccer game. I've been to a soccer game. I'm like, I don't know why, but I'm ready to like fight. I'm picking the team. I'm going with it. We're gonna fight. And politics is feeling a lot more like sports these days.
SubhanAllah, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why do you think that's happening?
It's empowering, you know. We've really been stripped of a lot of our own thoughts and progress. You know, that's an interesting question. I think these have something to do with it. I think the way the world is consuming the algorithm that has been tailored just for them and their bubble, it's very dangerous. We're not being exposed to things that are different from us. You know, we're not really aware. I try to, one piece of advice I give young people who want to be activists: read right-wing news, read left-wing news, and then read like Reuters or AP, the one in the middle that they get their information from. See how all sides are telling the story, because if you're being exposed in this, you're in a snow globe of one opinion, everyone outside of it's going to look like a demon and a monster. You know what I mean? They got Buddhists. Anyone who knows the Buddhists know that these are not violent people. But then you go to Myanmar, they were slaughtering the Rohingya Muslims, slaughtering in the most obscene and violent ways. And Facebook was one of the biggest tools that they used. I think we are being trapped into our cell phones with these one-sided perspectives. And I think it's very intentional. Like you were talking about, it's like this, like, someone higher up is really calling these shots, but we're almost feeding into their little algorithm, which is like, yeah, it's really worrisome.
So there was a documentary on Netflix actually that I want to recommend. I don't know if you watched it, about the algorithm, and it was really good, and it showed that very clearly. I think it was called The Social Dilemma. Have you seen The Social Dilemma?
Blew my mind. I was
Yeah.
like, I'm a slave. I'm a slave, and my attention is the money in which they're.
Yeah. So I recommend everyone listening to this to give it a watch, to watch The Social Dilemma, just to understand the impact of social media and how it, you know, it's made in a way where, you know, whatever you are engaging with, whatever you are looking at, it wants to give you more because it wants to keep you on the platform, right? So as you mentioned, if you're looking at, you know, right-wing media, well, it's going to give you more of that and more of that, and then you're just kind of isolated in your bubble with one opinion. Whereas, you know, if you were to think back, even just, you know, 10, 20 years ago, you would read the newspaper, you watch TV, and yes, there's channels that have, you know, of course, differing opinions. If you watch like Fox News versus like CBC, et cetera, et cetera. But you had, you know, you flipping the channels and you had like 5 options and that's it. But now now you're being spoon fed what you want to hear, and it just kind of increase your convictions more and more, and then until you, as you mentioned, you think the other side, they're complete demons. And yeah.
You can't. I don't blame anyone for hating the other side. You know, and what it looks like, all these Muslims are like super crazy terrorists. That's all they're exposed to. They're not, you know. But it is important for Muslims to be in the media, but how we're in the media also is going to make a difference. You know?
100%. Bringing the conversation back to entrepreneurship and poetry, inshallah. So for you, do you consider yourself an entrepreneur?
I am working to really develop the business side of my life. And I think I have been, but not intentionally, not with the awareness and the knowledge of how it all works. You know?
Now the thing is, you have mashallah, a pretty awesome following on Instagram. People who follow you, who like to listen to you speak and kind of keep up to date with just your opinions and the things that you share, which is really nice to see. And of course, that takes a little bit of entrepreneurship acumen to be able to develop a voice that people can resonate with and connect with, and people can connect to. What would you say, or what would you credit your ability to help spread your message? Because especially if you tell me something like, well, poetry is one of my things. Well, you need people to read it for it to actually make a difference, don't you? So how do you track the eyeballs?
SubhanAllah, that's a, how do we attract the eyeballs? So I think there is an element, that craftsmanship is the word I would use. There is an element of polishing and really deeply investing. And in fact, while you were talking and asking this entrepreneurship question, I always imagine like a business, but in a lot of ways, academia can be a form of entrepreneurship. And I designed my degree in a way that would empower me to be able to work with communities in really lasting ways. I mean, the writing hour, that's my show on Instagram. Every week I come on and I teach writing, and we talk about really deep things. And it is informed by frameworks and messages of healing, and then brought in by my craft and my dedication to the art, and how to really masterfully develop my eloquence, for example, and improve my vocabulary and my well-roundedness. So you're sort of bringing knowledge of the worlds and the knowledge of the self, and I think you're bringing them together. And I alhamdulillah, I have to give credit to the individuals who, to the activists and the journalists in the community who thought my story was worth sharing. When you're doing good work, people will find out about it. That's what I think. Or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will know, and not even the left hand will be aware. And it really does depend on the heart and what the impact can potentially be. But when it comes down to it, do your work excellently as if no one is looking. Do your work sincerely as if no one is looking. And wallahi, this has been true time and time again. To change one life is to change all of mankind. If you get 20 people tuned into your podcast and they walk away having been shaped and moved, you have impacted 20 worlds, 20 distinct worlds. And the game is rough. And I'm not going to lie, it gets intimidating because, alhamdulillah, I got some followers. But then you look at someone who has more and you're like, wow, I'm on the bottom of my game, I don't have the numbers, I don't have the likes, I don't have the production company and all of this. And really, it's so important to work in what you do in your niche with your ihsan. Do the best you can with what you have.
MashaAllah, that was beautiful. And I think that's the most beautiful way to wrap up this episode. Jazakallah khair for joining us, Sister Ahmad. Where can people go if they want to follow you, they want to keep up to date with what you're doing?
Head to Amal the Poet. We have a lot of cool things that are unraveling soon, inshallah. So I'm on Instagram and Facebook.
Awesome, mashallah. So we'll be linking those links in the description of the episode, guys. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, check the episode notes. If you're watching on YouTube, just check the description. We'll link her social media profile so you can go and follow her and keep up to date with her work. And definitely go and check out her talks on TED. They're on YouTube, inshallah. They're really nice. And go and learn more about what she does. And Ahmad, jazakallah khair for joining us. This was an absolute amazing episode. I really enjoyed every minute of it. Jazakallah khair.
Thanks for everyone who's listening.
All right, take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.